now introduce our speaker. We'll be talking about the events that led to Patrick Henry's famous speech, along with the history of the St. John's churchyard and notables buried there. In fact, through our Historic Preservation Fund, GRIVA recently donated funds to assist the St. John's Church Foundation efforts to repair gravestones at Historic John's Church, 1741 in Richmond, Virginia. The church is famous for the speech, as you're about to hear. This historically important church has been a National Historic Landmark since 1961. The foundation recently reported that 70 gravestones have been repaired to date, and I'm sure that's gone up since this was written, along with other important preservation projects related to the church's history. Preservation is ongoing, and you can join us in these preservation efforts at historicstjohnschurch.org. I will put that in the chat box, and Stephen will be sharing it as well. Stephen Wilson is Executive Director at the St. John's Church Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission, established in 1938, whose mission is to spark a global appreciation for understanding the role that Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech had in setting America on its path to liberty for all, and to ignite the public's interest in preserving the historic site where it happened. He has been at St. John's Church Foundation since 2019. He served for 2 years as the organization's first Director of Development and was named Executive Director in 2021. He currently serves on the Board of Trustees at the Frontier Culture Museum in Staunton, Virginia, the Richard Bland College Foundation, and the Richmond Chapter Sons of the American Revolution. His past board experience includes Peter Paul RVA, the Petersburg Area Art League, and Crater Community Hospice. He has earned degrees from the University of Mary Washington and Richard Bland College of William and Mary, and he holds a certificate in sustainable urban agriculture from the Virginia State University. In his spare time, he enjoys hiking and maintaining an urban fig orchard. He lives in Westover Hills in the city of Richmond. Please join me in welcoming Stephen. Stop sharing. And Stephen, I muted everybody, so I need you to unmute. Thank you.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, Paula, thank you so much for that introduction. You probably didn't know you were going to be getting a talk about a fig orchard tonight. Maybe that'll come a little bit later. But thank you so much for the introduction. And thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight and allowing me a few minutes of your time to talk about one of the most important historic sites in our nations, actually one that I'm standing in right now, that being historic St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia, the site of Patrick Henry's unforgettable Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. And Patrick Henry actually delivered his speech literally right behind me. I'm going to turn this a little bit. If you can see, I'm going to point to this window right here, the plate glass window. We know that he delivered his speech off of that window. So he was either in the pew directly behind me or the one kind of diagonally behind me. So I'm literally standing probably 3 feet away from where Patrick Henry delivered his speech on March 23rd, 1775. What I'd like to do tonight is talk a little bit about the history of the church, which is the oldest church in the city of Richmond. Talk about the history of the churchyard, which is the oldest public cemetery in the city of Richmond. And then we'll segue. We'll talk about the events that led up to the Second Virginia Convention, March of 1775. So we've got some good context. And then we'll do, I won't call it a deep dive, but we'll do a semi-deep dive on the events of March 23rd, 1775. Who was here? How many people were here? Were those people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? Were they revolutionaries? Were they loyalists? And then whether you like it or not, you're going to get a theatrical component to this presentation. I'm going to enact a good chunk, maybe even all of Patrick Henry's speech. And then we'll segue again and talk about some of the work that we take on at the St. John's Church Foundation. And then I'll wrap up by giving a recap of the 250th anniversary of the speech last year, and then plans for the 250th anniversary of our nation here at St. John's in just a few weeks. Paula, thanks again for the introduction. As you heard, my name's Stephen Wilson. I serve as Executive Director for the St. John's Church Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization, as you heard, 501c3, established all the way back in 1938, which makes us a pretty old nonprofit organization. You do not find many nonprofits that get to 100 years old, and we are 88 years old. Our mission is focused in two key areas. One is education. We preserve the legacy of the speech by offering lots of educational programs. We are most known for our Liberty or Death reenactments, which featured costume actors who recreate the events that happened right here. But we have a lecture series. We have many living history programs, both in person and virtually. So education's a big part of our mission. The other part of our mission is historic preservation. And you heard that GRIVA was a supporter of our organization. GRIVA made a very generous gift to support gravestone repairs. And so late in the presentation, I want to touch on that a little bit. Let you know who we're not. We are not involved with religious activities. This is an active church. People have been worshiping right here since 1741. As I mentioned, this is the oldest church in Richmond, but St. John's Episcopal Church manages all of the religious activities. We manage preservation and historic preservation and education. So we are two separate organizations who share the same space with very different missions. Who we are also not is we're not part of the National Park Service. We are not a state agency. We are a standalone nonprofit organization that receives zero government financial support, that relies on the generosity of the public in order to be able to fulfill our mission every year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, and then we will get going on this presentation. I'm assuming everybody can see my presentation.
Yep, perfect.
Perfect, thank you. So what you see on this first slide is one of our Patrick Henry actors performing the speech literally 5 feet from me. And we offer a lot of reenactments each year, about 100 reenactments per year, although the public would know that we offer about 20. We do a lot of school groups, we do a lot of private performances, but we also offer 20 public reenactments, which start last weekend, and we offer reenactments every Sunday through Labor Day weekend, 1:30 on Sundays. Tickets are $15. Awesome live theater, and then we have a few other dates throughout the year. All right, and I'm hoping people can see my cursor move around on the screen. So this is Richmond's oldest church. We are, for those of you who are dialing in from around the country, we are located on Broad Street in Richmond, about 12 blocks from the state capitol. We are between 24th and 25th Streets. If you can see my cursor, Broad Street would be kind of right in front of my cursor. And then notice at the very top of the screen, you're going to see a bend in the James River. This is where Richmond got its name. It looks like a similar bend on the Thames River in London in an area called Richmond on the Thames. And then that's how Richmond got its name. But what you're seeing here is an aerial shot of the church just a few years ago. Pretty big church, but this is not what it looked like in 1741. If you can see my cursor, this is the original structure of the church right here. And Richmond's population in 1741 was just 200 people. So this is a very modest church. Looks like, in fact, I'll show you, I brought props. This is what it would have looked like in 1741. Very simple, modest frame structure. In 1772, again, follow my cursor, this addition was put on. And this is what the church would have looked like in 1772. This would have been 3 years before Patrick Henry's speech. The addition is important because in 1772, this building becomes the largest building in the colony of Virginia outside of Williamsburg, which means that this will become a very ideal meeting location for all of the delegates who came here for the Second Virginia Convention. The bell tower, if you can see my cursor, was installed in 1829. And then back in the very rear was a south-facing addition installed in 1905 to accommodate an organ that was donated to the church. All right, next slide. So not only is this Richmond's oldest church, but this is also Richmond's oldest public cemetery, and we have notables buried here, including the mother of Edgar Allan Poe, Eliza Poe, and also the only signer of the Declaration of Independence who is buried in the city of Richmond, and that is George Wythe. Now, these are both grave markers. They are not original gravestones. Both Eliza Poe and George Wythe were buried in unmarked graves, as were many of the folks who were buried at St. John's Church. The public cemetery was in use from 1800 to 1820, although burials go back as far as the 1740s. But these are grave markers. These were coincidentally both installed in the year 1922, so they are not original gravestones. The oldest gravestone in the city of Richmond that still exists is this one here at the bottom of your screen. That is the grave of Reverend Robert Rose. It dates all the way back to 1751. In case you're wondering where he was a reverend, he was the rector of the Albemarle Parish just outside of Charlottesville, and he was not a Richmonder. He was traveling through the area, headed back to his hometown of Tappahannock, and he fell ill and he passed away. And so that is the oldest existing gravestone in the city of Richmond. But I want to point to the gravestone of Edward Carrington and follow my cursor. He is right here. And he's buried right outside of the window that I'm pointing to. That's the plate glass window. And I mention him because this is I think it's a great legend. Edward Carrington was here on March 23rd, 1775, but he wasn't here. He was standing outside the church. He listened to Patrick Henry's speech with many people with him through an open window, which tells me that March 23rd must not have been too cold of a day, because he listened to the speech through an open window, and he hears Patrick Henry deliver his famous words, and he declares to those who are standing around him, "Boys, bury me right here in this very spot." And there is his gravestone. So it's a great legend. But Carrington didn't just say, "Bury me right here." He listened to Patrick Henry's words, and then he took action. He joined the Virginia militia. He was part of the Continental Army. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel and was quartermaster general under Major General Nathaniel Greene in the Southern Campaign. And his claim to fame in the Revolutionary War is he helped get the Americans across the Dan River in the very famous race to the Dan. I'm going to take you down a rabbit hole just for a second. For those of you who know the Battle of Cowpens in South Carolina, that was a big win for the Americans. Daniel Morgan led the troops to victory, but General Cornwallis had a much larger army close by. Morgan knew it, and the Americans then marched to get away from Cornwallis. They marched north through South Carolina. They marched north through North Carolina, and they are racing to the Dan River to escape back to Virginia. It was Edward Carrington, as quartermaster general, who identified the crossing place on the Dan River, a deep water spot in the river, had the boats ready for the Americans to cross, and the Americans beat the British to the spot by just a few hours. So the Americans are able to cross the river. Cornwallis is just a little bit late, and some say that Edward Carrington actually saved the war for the Americans. On the 250th anniversary of Patrick Henry's speech last year, PBS documentarian and filmmaker Ken Burns was here, and he actually sat literally right behind me next to our Patrick Henry actor. When Ken Burns showed up here, he wanted to see the gravestone of Edward Carrington's wife. That is Betsy Ambler. Now, unfortunately, she is in an unmarked grave. He wanted to see her gravestone because she is one of the personalities who is featured in his new PBS or new-ish PBS series, The American Revolution. All right, so some statistics about the churchyard. There are 3,500 people-ish, and we're pretty confident that that number is within 1 to 200 of being exactly accurate. But we know that over 3,000 people are buried in the St. John's churchyard because we have vestry records from the church, we have city records, but most importantly, we have taken ground-penetrating radar and gone over the churchyard. And so through those various data points, we've estimated the total burials at about 3,500, but there are only about 400 gravestones that exist in the churchyard, and that is because most people who were buried here were buried in unmarked graves, and that was very customary between 1800 and 1820 when this was Richmond's first public cemetery. 85 soldiers who fought in the War of 1812 are buried here, and 20 American patriots who fought during the American Revolutionary War are also buried at St. John's Church. This churchyard was considered full in 1820, but burials still trickled in till about 1822, and that's when Shockoe Hill Cemetery opened up. Hollywood Cemetery is the third oldest cemetery in Richmond, by the way. All right, so here you'll see an artist drawing of what the church would have looked like in 1741, and I'm going to go back to my prop. So this is going to be your front door right here. Population in Richmond is about 200. Notice above that front door is going to be your church bell. This bell is part of the permanent exhibit at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, or what some of you may remember as the Virginia Historical Society, and you can go see that. And this is an artist drawing of what the church would have looked like at the time that Patrick Henry delivered his speech. It looks almost the same from this photo as your previous slide, but notice over on the left, the addition. And again, I'm going to point to my props here. This is what the church would have looked like in the 1770s when Patrick Henry delivered his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. Some interior shots of the church. You have here, if you see my cursor, and then over here on the right is a colonial sounding board. It is original, dates all the way back to 1741, and it is a pre-electronics sound system. It is the finest specimen in Virginia. There are a few of these. St. Luke's Church, which is the oldest church in Virginia, has one down in Smithfield. Historic Christ Church has one in the Northern Neck. There's one up in Northern Virginia. But every sounding board looks like an old shabby piece of wood, which is what this one looked like about a dozen years ago. And we paid over $100,000 at the foundation to have this restored. We could not even see that sun. It literally looked like an old shabby piece of wood, and now it's pristine. Some additional photos of the inside of the church. These are stained glass windows, including this one directly behind me. They were installed between 1880 and 1920. These both were actually repaired in the last year. I'm going to move a little bit. They are not Tiffany windows, but they are of the Tiffany style, and I hope you can see me as I move. I'm going to go this way. Okay, so if you can still see me, here is a pane here, 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 here. I haven't counted them all up, but there are a lot of panes. Think of that stained glass window as a jigsaw puzzle. And what will happen to these stained glass windows over time is that because they're so heavy, they will tend to bow out and they will want to collapse under their own weight. You will notice bars going across this way. Those bars are meant to keep the window in place so it doesn't collapse under its own weight. When we had that window repaired at a cost of only $159,000, stained glass window repair is terribly expensive. This window was removed. It went back to the conservator's studio. Every one of those panes was removed and cleaned individually. The leading, which keeps all of those panes in place, was bad, and it needed to be re-leaded, so a mold had to be taken. This all took about 6 months. The window was finally installed, all the panes were cleaned, and when it was reinstalled, there was a protective cover put onto it, which it did not have previously. The material is called Lexan. It's not considered bulletproof, but it will stop a rock, it will stop a tree limb. They say it will stop a .22 handgun, so it will stop anything short of heavy artillery and will protect the window going forward. When you have the repairs done, it will add roughly about 100 years onto the life expectancy of the window, but it's expensive work. This is probably the most famous image of Patrick Henry, who is here in the if you see my cursor, delivering his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. I want to point to a couple of things in this image. First of all, you'll see a column here, and you'll see a column here. These columns never existed in the church. And then if you notice, there's a balcony which is rounded. That also never existed. And this does not look like a church. I don't see any church pews. So while it's a very dramatic and very famous photo of Patrick Henry delivering his famous speech, it's not architecturally historically accurate. All right, back to the fourth grade we go for just a moment. We, of course, all know about the Boston Tea Party, which would have happened at the end of 1773. 342 chests of tea get dumped into the Boston Harbor. You see a photo on this screen, on this image here. It's going to take a little while once the tea is dumped into the harbor for England to find out about the events of the Boston Tea Party, but that's going to happen in March of 1774. Parliament is going to retaliate against Massachusetts for its participation in the Boston Tea Party by passing the first of what are called the coercive acts, or in the colonies, you may know the term, the intolerable acts. The intolerable acts are meant to punish Massachusetts for their involvement in the Boston Tea Party, and it's going to include the closing of the Port of Boston. This is going to choke off the economy in Massachusetts, obviously have a detrimental effect on the economy in Massachusetts. It's also going to include the Quartering Act. Redcoats are going to be sent from England to Massachusetts, and these redcoats are meant to prevent any uprising. They are going to be put into people's houses, citizens' homes, at the expense of the citizen, meaning citizen's going to have to feed the redcoat. And you can imagine that tensions are going to be boiling over in Massachusetts because of this. Now, if we segue to Virginia, the elected leaders here in Virginia, the members of the House of Burgesses, are monitoring the situation up in Boston. They know about the intolerable acts, and they are concerned that the same thing may happen here in Virginia with the closing of the Chesapeake Bay. In May of 1774, we are now less than 1 year out from Patrick Henry's speech. The members of the House of Burgesses will adopt resolutions in support of the Boston colonists. They will have a day of prayer and a day of fasting to show their support. Virginia's royal governor, who is the last royal governor of Virginia, John Murray, better known in history as Lord Dunmore, is going to retaliate against the members of the House of Burgesses for their show of support for Massachusetts by dissolving the assembly. He is going to dissolve the members, or he's going to dissolve the House of Burgesses. Members of the House of Burgesses are then going to reassemble. They're going to do this in Williamsburg, and they're going to formulate a plan of action, which is going to be, they're going to continue to meet. They are going to meet without legal authority in a series of conventions that are known as the Virginia Conventions, or sometimes they're called the Virginia Revolutionary Conventions. And they're going to be 5 Virginia conventions. The first one's going to be in Williamsburg in August of 1774. The main order of business at the first Virginia Convention is to elect delegates to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. And what you see on this slide are the delegates that were elected to the First Continental Congress from Virginia. Now, there are actually 7. Here is the cut line. You'll see a dash here. Richard Bland of Prince George County will be one of those delegates. Benjamin Harrison V of Charles City County will be one. Edmund Pendleton of Caroline County. RH will stand for Richard Henry Lee of Westmoreland County. Patrick Henry, of course, is elected to the First Continental Congress. And I cropped this image and cut off George Washington, my apologies, and Peyton Randolph, who will be the president of the First Continental Congress. But I wanted to mention these names because every one of these names will be at St. John's Church at the Second Virginia Convention. And even if you look farther below the dash line, Jefferson is at St. John's Church. Thomas Nelson is at St. John's Church. Archibald Carey is at St. John's Church. All right, so let's fast forward a few months. We get to March of 1775. This is a full-week convention. St. John's Church is chosen as the site of the convention for multiple reasons. And something that I forgot to mention at the very top is that for the purpose of this conversation, I will call this church St. John's. But remember, this is part of the Church of England because we're still in colonial times. This was referred to back then in the 1770s as the Henrico Parish Church. St. John's did not get its current name until the early 1800s. But for the purposes of this conversation, we'll call it St. John's. This is the largest building outside of Williamsburg in Virginia. And so this is an ideal meeting location for the convention. That's really reason number one. Reason number two, the one that I find most interesting, is that the rector of this church, a gentleman by the name of the Reverend Miles Selden, who is, he is an agent of England. I mean, he is the rector of a parish that is part of the Church of England, but he's sympathetic towards the delegates' cause. So he allows them to come here, and he's known in history as the Patriot Parson. Reason number two, he lets them come here. Reason number three is that the delegates did not want to meet in Williamsburg because there was concern that Lord Dunmore would send in the redcoats. That ultimately does not happen, but they want distance from Williamsburg. So this is an ideal meeting location because of the distance it provides from Williamsburg. The rector allows them to meet here, and it's a big building. All right, so this is a full-week convention. The main order of business, similar to the First Virginia Convention, where they elected delegates to the First Continental Congress, at this convention, they need to elect delegates to the Second Continental Congress. That's the main order of business. But on March 23rd, 1775, 27 days before the first shots are fired up in Massachusetts, Patrick Henry has other ideas. He is going to propose that Virginia establish a well-regulated militia to position the colony into a state of defense in readiness for war against the mother country. Essentially, he is saying no more talk. it's time to go to war. His resolution is resolve, therefore, that this colony be immediately put into a posture of defense, that a committee be appointed to prepare a plan for embodying, arming, and disciplining such a number of men as may be sufficient for that purpose. This is one of our Patrick Henry actors delivering his famous speech on the 250th anniversary day last year. Off to the very right, this gentleman here is a direct Patrick Henry descendant. And then off to the left, you may notice that that is former Governor Glenn Youngkin. All right, well, who was here? Patrick Henry obviously was here. He was representing Hanover County. George Washington was in attendance, representing Fairfax County. Some of the other delegates who were here, some notables: Thomas Jefferson, Peyton Randolph, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Nelson, Benjamin Harrison V, not the president, Robert Carter Nicholas, who was the treasurer of the colony of Virginia at the time, Edmund Pendleton, Richard Bland, and you will probably not notice this name down at the very bottom, John Tabb of Amelia County. I put him in here because he's my sixth great-grandfather, but not because he's particularly notable. Nobody's ever heard of him. But you'll see that some of these names I've bolded, and the names that I've bolded are people who were in support of Patrick Henry's resolution. We're not sure about John Tabb, so we're not sure if he was for or against. But these other names, Washington, Jefferson, Lee, Nelson, all were in favor of, but a lot of folks were not. So this was a pretty even split. So Patrick said, imagine this. I'm standing inside of St. John's Church right now. If I'm Patrick Henry, I'm proposing this resolution, and then there's shock. And delegates will stand up, and George Washington will say, the taking up of arms should always be a last resort. But can any honorable man scruple or hesitate to take up arms against such a precious a thing as liberty? Is it not as clear as the sun at its noontime brightness that some provisions must be made to ensure the proper arms and ammunition for the public good? Yes, it is true. The training of our militia has been much neglected. So I will willingly resume command of Virginia's forces if necessary. It is my intention to offer up my life and my fortune in our cause if needed. Gentlemen, the sword of our defense must be forged upon the anvil of necessity. I urge that these resolutions currently under discussion be adopted. So Washington is for. That passage is from our Liberty or Death reenactment. Thomas Jefferson is for. Richard Henry Lee, who is known as the second greatest orator in Virginia, will second the resolution. So he will be in favor of. Thomas Nelson, who is very young at the time, I think he's 32 years old, will talk about how he's a merchant from Yorktown. He derives much profit from his trade with England. But then he goes on to say, but why should we raise up our fortunes when they may be taken from us at the leisure of others? Tyranny and naked aggression must be met with preparation and fortitude. Let me say this, and I call upon God to witness. If any British troops arrive in the county of York, where I am lieutenant, I will await no orders. I will summon the militia and drive the invaders to the water's edge. In favor. But Benjamin Harrison is against. Robert Carter Nicholas is against. Pendleton is against. So it's a very even split. So we have these arguments both for and against. And then Patrick Henry rises up and he calls to Peyton Randolph. Peyton Randolph is going to give him the floor. And Henry has to convince just enough delegates to sway the vote in favor of. So he doesn't have to convince everybody. He just needs to pull a few votes. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to put on my wig, get in the mood, and I don't know if I'll deliver the whole speech, but I'm going to deliver a little bit of it. All right. No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentleman who had just addressed this house. But different men oftentimes see the same subject in different lights. So I shall hope that it not be thought of as disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do, opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall set forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before this House is one of awful moment to our country. For my part, I shall consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way in which we can hope to arrive at the truth and to fulfill that great responsibility which we owe to God and to our country. Shall I hold back my opinions at such a time as this for fear of giving offense? I shall consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty against the majesty of heaven, who I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural for man to indulge in the illusion of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to that song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. But is this the part of wise men engaged in a long and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be among the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, those things which so nearly concern our temporal salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of the spirit it might cause, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future, but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been within the conduct of the British ministry for the past 10 years that justify these hopes with which men solace themselves in this House. Could it be that insidious smile by which our petitions have been so lately received? Trust it not. It shall prove a snare unto your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petitions comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our lands. Are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. And I ask you, gentlemen, what means this martial array if its purpose not to force us into submission? Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir. She has none. They were meant for us. They could be meant for no other. They were sent to bind and rivet upon us the chains with which the British ministry has been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? We've been trying that for the last 10 years. What have we new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up to every light by which it is possible, and it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? But what terms shall we find that have not already been exhausted? Let us not deceive ourselves. We have done everything that could be done to avert this storm that is now coming on. We have petitioned. We have remonstrated. We have supplicated. And we have prostrated ourselves before the throne to implore its interposition into the tyrannical hands of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt at the foot of the throne. There are no longer any English, no Scots, no Britons, only a set of wretches, cowards, sunk in luxury, who can no longer look the brave Americans in the face. If we wish to be free, if we wish to preserve, inviolate those inestimable rights and liberties for which we have been so long contending, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat it, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Shall it be in the next week or in the next year? Shall it be when we are totally disarmed and there's a British soldier stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength through irresolution and inaction? Shall we gather the strength of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs, hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies have bound and shackled us hand and foot? No, we are not weak. If we make a proper use of those things which the God of nature hath placed in our power, 3 millions of people, armed and in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country as to which we possess, shall be invincible by any force our enemies may send against us. Besides, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle is not to the strong alone. It's to the active, the vigilant, the brave. Besides, we have no election. Even if we were base enough to desire it, it is already too late to retire from the contest. Our chains are forged. The clanking can be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable. And let it come. I repeat it, let it come. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. All right. Well, you got the whole speech. I would have liked to have moved around a little bit more, but I didn't want to go off camera. So Patrick Henry finishes this speech, and there are 120 delegates in this room, many for, many against. And now we've got to take a vote. Peyton Randolph is going to ask that the delegates weigh their decisions carefully. All in favor say aye, all opposed say no. And the resolution is going to pass by just 4 or 5 votes. The impact of Patrick Henry's speech, and this is the important part, what is the impact? This means that when those shots are fired 27 days later, this is not going to be the Massachusetts Revolution or the New England Revolution. Virginia is, as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, the largest colony in area, in population and in wealth. It's a big deal having Virginia on the side of revolution. This is the American Revolution. As you see here on this slide, Tiananmen Square, 1989, give me liberty or give me death. shown there at Tiananmen Square. And liberty or death has been a rallying cry for revolutions around the world for 250 years. So why do we do it? Why do we as a foundation preserve the legacy of Patrick Henry's speech? I've got to tell you all a secret that I asked my friend this, and my friend is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT says that but I love the answer. A defining moment. It inspired Virginia to support independence in 1775. It continues to inspire freedom movements around the world, like in 1989 in Tiananmen Square in China. In education, the most important part, it teaches students about democracy. And if you look at this photo, it's a watermark, but those are students who were actually here on the 250th anniversary day last year.
Actually, Stephen, you're not sharing your slides anymore because you turned it off so we could watch you. So we're not seeing the photo you're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see. Did I lose you?
No.
All right. Okay, let me go back. Sorry about that. And there we go. Okay, so thank you for mentioning that. So here's the image of Tiananmen Square, 1989. Here's the image when I referenced ChatGPT, which gets us up to this image here. So our signature program is our Liberty or Death reenactment. We've been performing reenactments right in this very room since the 1970s. They feature 9 actors in the period attire, and they recreate the arguments and debates that occurred here in 1775. We perform, and this sounds almost unbelievable, but we perform about 100 reenactments per year, but only about 25 of those are for the general public. Most of the reenactments we perform are for school groups, including 40 for 4th grade students at Title I schools, and those are all for free. We raise money so that we can offer the reenactments for free to Title I schools. All right. Our educational programs include a speaker series, living history performances, lots of living history programs, and even outreach and speaking engagements like this one. This photo here is the George Washington Masonic National Memorial in Alexandria, where I performed in partial costume a couple of months ago. This is a program which is actually on our YouTube page. It's called What Does Liberty Mean to You? And it featured 3, and here they are, first-generation Chinese Americans who talked about their lived experiences living in China and comparing them to their lived experiences here, and talking about liberty, or, as some of them talked about, lack thereof, living in China. And this gentleman, by the way, this gentleman here, Daniel Gong, was actually at Tiananmen Square in 1989. We are a significant tourist attraction. We generate at least 35,000 visitors, close to 40,000 every year. Here, what you see is the Virginia Tourism's official travel guide, or what we know better as Virginia is for Lovers. In 2025, they had 3 rotating covers, and we were one of those rotating covers. This year, Richmond Region Tourism has put us on the cover of their official 2026 Visitor's Guide, and less than 2 weeks ago, Richmond Region Tourism named St. John's Church as its 2026 Attraction of the Year for the Richmond region. Historic preservation is a big part of our mission. Again, thank you to GRIVA for its support of gravestone repair. This is just a funny photo of some of our actors kind of posing for a photo, but these other folks are volunteers who are cleaning gravestones. We have repaired close to 80 gravestones over the last 12 to 18 months. I put 70 on here, but that's not actually an accurate number. It's a little bit higher than that. And we have repaired many of these stained glass windows, but they're terribly, terribly expensive to repair. This one was $159,000 to repair. And while you can't see it, there is another window of comparable size on the other side of the church, which will also cost $159,000. We've raised the money. We just need to do the work. And that'll happen later this year. These are some before and after photos. This was taken, and Karen Caravaglia is on this call. She was actually one of the volunteers who cleaned this very gravestone. Notice the photo on the left, you can't read a thing. And then just a little while later, you can actually see the name on the gravestone. And what's really cool about this is not only that they brought the gravestone back to life, But I actually hosted the Agee family here just a couple of weeks ago, and they got to see that gravestone, and see one of their descendants. They were so proud of the way it looked, and I told them that we just got it cleaned. Here's some images of before and after shots of gravestone repair. I'm not going to take too much time here, but I just want to show you that with this photo on the left is a gravestone that broke in half and was literally wedged into the ground. And so it was in horrible condition. It had to be put back together and consolidated. It had to be cleaned. And the after image is this one here, where it's actually now back upright and put back together. Next slide, you see something very similar, a gravestone on the left that looks in horrible condition. It was actually toppled over and just not buried, but just embedded into the ground. We cleaned it, we consolidated it, we put it back together, and now it's upright again. And this gravestone here, this is actually sandstone. I didn't mention earlier that the gravestones in this churchyard are going to be predominantly marble, some sandstone, some granite, only one slate. For those of you who are familiar with those materials, you will know that they do not hold up well over the test of time. So yeah, they get in really rough shape after a couple of hundred years. All right, I'm going to close with just a quick recap of the 250th anniversary of Patrick Henry's speech. For those of you who are familiar with the Virginia 250 Commission, they were our planning partner for the event. Ken Burns was one of our 3 keynote speakers. He was the one that everybody got really excited about. But Governor Glenn Youngkin was here, and he was one of our keynote speakers. And VA 250 National Honorary Chair Carly Fiorina was our other speaker. As I alluded to earlier, Ken Burns literally sat right here next to the Patrick Henry actor. And this event was covered by the AP, by Politico, by the Washington Post, by tons of media outlets. And you can actually see this number quoted on the VA 250 website. They claim, and I'm not saying it's a false claim, but they claim that 250 anniversary weekend generated over 1 billion media impressions, 1 billion. And I just find that number almost impossible to believe, but yet I saw it. I mean, I saw all of the national media attention that we were getting, and it was really, really cool. The reenactment, which you can actually see online, was live streamed. There were almost 6,000 people who watched the live stream, but you can find it on YouTube, on Vimeo. It's on the C-SPAN website. I think it's at a couple other places too. But if you go to YouTube and just type in Patrick Henry 250, it'll come right up. You can watch the short clip, which is about 10 minutes of Patrick Henry delivering a speech, or you can watch the entire program, including the speakers. And last slide. How can you support? The easiest way, just go to our website, historicstjohnschurch.org. There's a button where you can subscribe to our e-news, and you can stay current on happenings here, programs and initiatives. That's a great way to stay connected. As any nonprofit will tell you, if you like what you hear and you want to support the cause, and I do just want to reiterate, we get no government financial support. You can certainly make a tax-deductible gift at our website. Maybe you want to volunteer and clean gravestones. Maybe you want to volunteer and usher people at one of our reenactments. These are all opportunities. But that is all I've got for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do a stop share, and then we can take some questions. I hope there's time. All right, I did a stop share.
As much time as you'd like. Hold on a second. Let me see what I can do about that noise, if that's...
And I'm going to...
That's not her.
Get that light out of the way.
Okay. Now the sound is... If everybody could keep their microphones muted, that would be great. During the talk when you were... Second, you had a question. Was the church damaged during the Revolutionary War, or for that matter, during the Civil War?
Really, really good question. It's somehow, some way, it survives both. Benedict Arnold, when he raided Richmond, he actually camped troops here, but he didn't destroy the church. It makes its way through the Civil War, and this is just my opinion. I don't know this for fact, but I would say that because St. John's is kind of up the hill and away from the downtown area where a lot of the burning took place at the end of the Civil War, I think that is perhaps why St. John's escaped damage from the Civil War, but somehow it makes it through both.
Cool. Were there any women present inside the church to hear that speech?
That's a really good question. So to the best of our ability, there were not. The only people who were allowed inside the church would have been the delegates. So these would have been members or former members of the House of Burgesses. who were representing their various counties. Almost every single county in Virginia is going to send 2 delegates. So when I'm mentioning, Jefferson was here, he was one of 2 delegates representing Albemarle County. Washington, 120 delegates inside, and a whole lot of people were outside the church looking in through the windows.
Yeah, that was the next question is, do you know what the reactions were to those outside the church grounds upon hearing his speech?
So interestingly, Peter Francisco, and maybe some of you know that name, supposedly had a very similar story to that of Edward Carrington's, where he was so moved by what he heard. So I'm wondering if the legend kind of just repeated itself, or perhaps everyone had a similar reaction. But yes, there were people who had come here. And remember, Richmond's population is only about 600. So it's still a relatively small place, but people knew that there was big action happening at St. John's Church. They came to the convention and they were on the grounds and kind of looking in the windows to see what was happening.
Cool. Was the speech entered into the minutes of the meeting? How do we have the entire speech? I can't imagine somebody furiously taking notes, and it's not like we had YouTube and cell phones at the time.
I would love to know who asked that question, because they get the gold star for asking the best question. So
our GRIVA president, David Jordan.
Well, he literally gets the gold star because Patrick Henry never wrote his speeches down. He did not write the "Give Me Liberty" or "Give Me Death" speech down. There is a journal of the Second Virginia Convention, which is, I think it's like 27 pages. And it's actually digital or made, it's been made available digitally at the Library of Virginia, so you can read it, but the speech is not part of the journal. So how do we know what he said if there's no written account? Patrick Henry's original biographer, some 30 plus years after the Second Virginia Convention, was writing the biography, and he interviewed people who were still living. He read letters that said, oh, Patrick Henry said this or he said that. And William Wirt in the early 1800s is essentially the writer of the "Give Me Liberty" or "Give Me Death" speech that we know today. And I will add that William Wirt was a Patrick Henry superfan. So the next question is, what did he embellish? And we don't know the answer to that. But just know that Patrick Henry never wrote his speeches down. And as some of you will know the name John Kukla. John Kukla wrote Patrick Henry, Champion of Liberty, generally regarded as the best researched biography of Patrick Henry. John Kukla likes to say that he imagines Patrick Henry up in Hanover County at Scotchtown, the day before the convention, kind of pacing around, practicing liberty or death. I have no idea if that's what was going on or not, but I'll quote him and say that's what he says.
Yeah, that was the next question: is was it written in advance, or was he reading from it? Obviously not, or was it extemporaneous? So you just kind of answered that.
Yeah, we just don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately.
Yeah. Were there any officials not including the House of Burgesses there at the time of the speech? And did Richmond have a mayor at the time?
So not that I'm aware of. So I'm not really going to be able to answer your question. But what I will answer is something you didn't ask. George Wythe, we do not believe was here. George Wythe, obviously buried right outside, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was the clerk to the House of Burgesses at the time. Now, of course, the House of Burgesses had been dissolved, but he was the clerk, and he should have been the clerk at the Second Virginia Convention, but we can't find his name anywhere in the records. There was another gentleman who was the clerk. So we assume that George Wythe was actually not here. For what reason, we don't know. But were there any other officials that were here? To the best of my knowledge, no, but I don't know that with certainty. And I don't recall who the mayor would have been at that time.
Okay. How were the tombstone pieces put back together? Did volunteers do the work, or did you hire professionals?
Yeah, so we hired a professional conservator who specializes in gravestone repair. The name of the product was actually on one of those previous slides. I don't remember the name of it. It's like, John M120. That's not the actual name, but it's something like that. So he uses what's called a consolidant, and he essentially, this is going to be a horrible analogy, but I kind of think of it as like a cavity, and he's kind of filling in the cavity. And so he's using the consolidant to kind of put the pieces back together. And sometimes there'll be like a divot taken out of the gravestone, and he's filling that in. You're not bringing the stone back to its original state, but you're hopefully preventing further decay.
Gotcha. Somebody said, I think Virginia DAR is raising money for the cemetery, question mark. So?
So not currently. Now, we have applied in the past for a DAR historic preservation grant. The Commonwealth chapter of the DAR in Richmond was very interested in repairing the gravestone of Edward Carrington. We were, unfortunately, there were so many applications that came in that we were actually declined for that particular project, but we had another funder in place, so it all worked out. DAR has been a very good friend of ours for many years. The Commonwealth chapter in particular has partnered with us on naturalization ceremonies in the past. And we've got, of course, Karen Caravaglia on the call, who's a member of the Scotchtown chapter. They've been great. They've come here to do gravestone cleaning. I think they want to come back. So DAR is our friend, and the SAR is our friend too. I'm a member of the Richmond Chapter and serve on the Richmond Chapter's Board of Managers. Yeah, all the if you want to call them lineage organizations or patriotic organizations, they're all big super fans of ours, and the feeling is mutual.
Excellent. And Deborah says, I follow a gentleman on YouTube who documents old and abandoned cemeteries and graveyards and also repair and clean a lot of them. He's in Georgia, maybe near Talbot County. His name is Robert, and his channel is Sidestep Adventures in History. He points out all the military markers and documents.
So if he was interested in coming here as he's passing through the area, yeah, if he's got a big YouTube following, we would love for him to clean a gravestone or two and document that. I would just need to know his contact information. Yeah, we love it when volunteers clean gravestones.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is do people do who does the cleanings? These volunteer cleanings, do they organize something? Is it always a group? Do they need to come in advance to can you just show up with a bottle of D2? That's probably not the best way to do it.
No, really good question. So we would ask that they reach out to us in advance so we can schedule it. So we'll have buckets, soft scrub brushes, and we use D2, but we also sometimes just use water. The before and after images are pretty dramatic. I mean, within 20 to 30 minutes, you saw, in one of the slides, a stone that you could not read, and with just, literally some energy and some water and a scrub brush, you can actually read it just a few minutes later. But yes, people would need to reach out to us so we can schedule it. If we're short on volunteers, staff will get out there and clean gravestones.
Good, because there are so many ways to clean gravestones that actually damage them. So I would hope there would be some supervision as well.
And notice I said soft scrub brush.
Exactly.
Have a hard bristle brush and really, put a lot of arm strength into it, because you can actually damage the stone, especially these soft stones like a sandstone or a marble. You can actually kind of pull some of the material off the stone. So using a soft scrub brush is important.
It's amazing that they've lasted as long as they have. Mm. All right, well, that's all we have for questions. So I want to thank you very much for your time and great information. You're getting lots of thank yous in the chat box. This is very interesting lecture, very interesting and great lecture and acting. I enjoyed it and learned a few things.
I tell you, performing in front of a screen is a whole lot harder than performing in front of a live audience, because I don't really have anybody to look at, move around like I want to. So I'm glad that folks at least are saying that they enjoyed it. Yes. I enjoyed it.
It worked very well. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for coming, and the video will be up later this evening.
Thank you.